Welcome to another goddamn horror podcast presents The Grindhouse. And I'm your host today, Jonas Barnes. For anybody not familiar, The Grindhouse is our Patreon exclusive spinoff of another goddamn horror podcast. But here's the thing. Everybody that even goes to our Patreon page gets to check it out. We don't even put this one behind a paywall because we want you to hear all of it. And then after you hear it, then you can subscribe to the Patreon and get other cool shit. So if you haven't heard The Grindhouse, what we do is we take a movie and a guest, we deep dive the shit out of that movie. We pick at the bones. We go deep into it, spoilers and everything. And it's usually one of our guests that we've had on the show before. So we always like to have fun with that. Get a little one-on-one action with one of the guests. And that's what we're doing today. My guest today is somebody you've already heard over on another goddamn horror podcast. One of my favorite people, comedian here in New York, awesome dude all around, Gabe Pacheco. How we doing, man?
Boo! What's up, my friends? I love horror movie podcasts. Jonas, thank you for having me on this Patreon episode. It's me, Gabe Pacheco, coming back at you. You might, if you enjoy me, I've got my own podcast. It's the Halal Cartels podcast.
Fully recommend that, by the way.
Yeah, so that's where I'm at, and I love these crossover episodes.
They're always fun, man. It's always fun to get to the other side of people's artistic brains and figure out where they're at. And dude, the movie that we're talking about today, holy shit. So for anybody that is a fan of extreme cinema, you hear certain directors and you hear certain titles and they give you that tingly feeling. Like you'll hear High Tension, people will be like, oh shit, I remember High Tension. Or you hear Martyrs and they're like, oh shit, I remember Martyrs. But there's a director that always makes your spine kind of tingle when you hear him, because you're like, oh, this one's going to be fucked up. This one's going to be really fucked up. And that is Gaspar Noe, which I think that's how you pronounce it. I feel like he'd get really pissed if I mispronounce it. He would just be like, you fucked it up.
We're going to go with Gaspar Noe today.
Yeah.
So, I co-sign that pronunciation.
Yeah, that's what I'm going for on it. So if you're not familiar with him, he is a French extreme horror cinema director, also cinematographer. He's a brilliant filmmaker. First, I want to throw that out there. As far as his movies go, they're definitely not everybody's cup of tea, and that's understandable because his movies are very extreme. But he's very, very good at filmmaking. Like he knows what he's doing. Like his visuals are intoxicating and haunting. And that's on every movie he makes. Like he knows what to do behind a camera and he knows how to make you feel. And that's kind of a theme with his movies. So before we talk about the one we're talking about today, you said that you primed the palette with what I feel is like the training wheels of a Gaspar Noe film, if you're going to go down that rabbit hole, and that was Enter the Void, right?
Yeah. So, I've seen Climax like 3 times, but I have only seen, I didn't know anything else about Gaspar Noé's work. And I watched Enter the Void for the first time yesterday. And wow. It's funny that he's seen as both, I think, horror and this term extreme.
Yeah.
Those connotations for me make me think of something like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, or they make me think of that scene in Scarface with like the chainsaw in the bathtub.
Sure. Yeah.
They make me think of Cannibal Holocaust, or sort of like movies that have extreme gore, like Gorno. That's what I think of.
Sure. Yeah. Splatter films.
Yeah, splatter. But when I think of like Gaspar and watching Enter the Void, it's like it's more that the images are incredibly provocative.
Yeah.
And they're just abrasively human. Is a way I like to think about it, rather than showing me extreme gore for the sake of shock. It is that what he's showing me is shocking because it feels so like uncomfortably truthful.
Sure.
It's like these things that are submerged in our subconscious that we hide to be civilized.
Sure.
And then they poke out like the tips of icebergs in his films. And not only that, but like his movies are incredibly, at least Enter the Void, I looked at it and I was like, this is so beautiful. Like every frame is a painting. Every frame is is beautiful. So it's difficult to call it horror. It's almost like it's psychedelic, intoxicating horror.
Yeah. And that's the thing about Into the Void is it is a purely psychedelic film. Like when I say that, I mean it's not like a psychedelic film in the sense of like, you know, House of a Thousand Corpses, where it's all this like technicolor, like weird swirly like camera work type shit. It is kind of that, but it's done in a very real way. Because Enter the Void is like, for anybody that's not seen it, quote unquote, the void is kind of like entering the human psyche, is like, I guess the best way to put it, because
Yeah.
it's almost like a travel through somebody's soul. Um, and I mean that in a very literal sense. Like it's it
Yeah.
literally is through the soul.
Can we spoil the film in this podcast?
Enter the Void, or yeah,
Yeah.
of course. I mean,
Yeah.
it's what, a fucking 15-20-year-old movie almost. Yeah, I feel
Absolutely.
like we're okay with that.
Yeah. Well, so what within the first like couple minutes of it, we're introduced to the book of the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and it's brought up as the movie is basically what happens as your life flashes before your eyes when you're dying. And
It's like DMT the movie.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So our main character is he dies in a drug deal gone wrong, and we're seeing his like sort of disembodied consciousness floating through time and space in like a neon glittery cyberpunk filthy Tokyo, which is also kind of a metaphor for the labyrinth of his mind or consciousness.
Yeah.
And that is so it is an incredibly spiritual movie as well.
Right.
And that I think is where maybe some people, I don't think that he does anything simply for shock. You know, in the same way that maybe I would go to a Catholic church and see Jesus stapled to the cross,
Right.
bloody with like bones protruding, or like a freshly risen zombie Jesus in a Mexican church.
For sure.
You know, we're seeing these horrific images in what we would call sort of our everyday spirituality. And yet, so what Gaspar is doing in something like Enter the Void, when he's showing you like sort of horrific scenes, it feels like it is on par with what you would see in like a Christian setting.
100%. And that's also the thing that's kind of interesting about Enter the Void, is because it's a very, when I say psychedelic, it's not like a you took mushrooms psychedelic. It very much feels and translates well to the fact that this guy is going through this, you know, this experience right before he hits death. Like it's translated almost perfectly to film in a way that I would think it should be. Like if I was to think of a way to do it like that, it's translated almost perfectly. And the thing with Gaspar Noe and what he does is, it's interesting that you said that you don't think he does anything just for shock, because people have often called him a shock director, because specifically for the movie Irreversible. So if you've never seen Irreversible, have you seen it before, Gabe?
No, I'm a novice when it comes to Noe's films. I've only seen
just Climax and this one. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So here's the thing about Irreversible. Trigger warning on this for sexual assault. I'd say that specifically because this movie is based around a particularly vicious sexual assault. But the theme of the movie is, it's called Irreversible, and it's a movie that is filmed in reverse. So it's a movie that's filmed back to front as opposed to front to back, kind of like the movie Memento,
Yeah.
but way more fucked up. So the beginning of the movie is the hardest part to get through, because the beginning of the movie starts with Monica Bellucci, who's an incredible actress, starts with her getting assaulted in a scene that I want to say is like 12 to 14 minutes long, like kind of similar in the same vein as like I Spit on Your Grave, but done with much more finesse than that. Like it doesn't feel like an exploitation film. It feels like you're experiencing what she's going through. So it's like that first 15 minutes is soul ripping. Like you are so angry at the end of this act, and you're feeling so badly for her, that the rest of the movie you don't know what's going on. You have no idea like what you're going to feel, etc. So the thing is with it is that the rest of the movie is essentially about her partner hunting down the guys that did it. And so it's a revenge film, but it's a reverse revenge film. So it's most rape revenge films are like, the woman unfortunately gets the sexual assault happening to her, and then she wakes up from it and goes fucking Rambo on him. This is not that. This is the partner or the people close to her doing it on her behalf. And the process of them hunting these people down is something that Gaspar Noe does well. It makes you feel everything. You feel the anger, you feel the sadness, you feel the grief, you feel the pain, you feel all of it because he's so good at putting it on film. And that movie is the one that people always go, oh, fuck, it's a Gaspar Noe film. Like,
man, I can see that because I wrote in my notes from watching the two that I saw, something that he does so well is their hyper personal experience is what I felt watching this. Like with both the films I saw, this like it's immersive. The work that he does is immersive. So if the scenes all feel long, and it could either feel tedious to you, or you can sort of embrace it and go with it and sort of like enter a meditative state.
Sure.
And he also is incredibly adept at having the audience members feel empathy for whatever is happening on the screen, and not in a way that feels glib or manipulative, like Steven Spielberg does.
Sure. Yeah.
Because there's like the Spielbergian approach of no matter what you put on screen, if you put the uplifting like John Williams score behind it, you'll feel heroic. Or
right.
That's not what I mean when I say that he is good at eliciting empathy from the audience. He really draws you into whatever's happening. So when you tell me that there's like a 14-minute assault at the beginning of Irreversible, I can like 100% see why that would be like turn people off, because with everything else that I saw, I can see his gift at putting you in a place to feel the vulnerability of whatever the emotional state is of the people who you're watching.
Sure. And that makes a lot of sense too. And the thing is with those types of movies, like I'll do a little sidetrack here. Over on another goddamn horror podcast, when we talked about doing the Sinister Six, we all did it ourselves, like all the boys did it. And one of the questions is, if there was a movie you could remove from existence, what would you do? And mine was I Spit on Your Grave. And the reason I said that is because the entire rape revenge subgenre or exploitation subgenre could exist without that movie. And that movie specifically there's no redeeming quality to it, because it's a movie that is so hurtful, and not even hurtful. I'm talking not even like on an offensive scale. I mean, the actual presentation of the movie is so hurtful that the payoff doesn't work. You know what I mean? Like the payoff of her getting the revenge just doesn't work, because even if you feel that release of the tension of her getting her revenge on these people, what they did to her and the way that it was filmed and the way that it was presented was so bad that it's just like there's nothing left. Like there's no release of the endorphins at the end of it. Whereas other movies that have existed within that same genre, that same subgenre, like the movie Revenge from Coraline Fargo, she's a French director as well. She did a movie, it's on Shudder, it's called Revenge, and it's a similar storyline. It's a woman that is out on like a vacation with this like rich scummy dude, and an assault happens. But here's the difference: they show you what's about to happen, and then the door closes, and then it focuses on the other guys in the room that don't help. They're not a part of the assault, but they also don't help her get away from the guy that's doing it. And you kind of like faintly hear it in the background, so you know what's happening, but they don't explicitly show it to you because they don't need to. Because what happens right afterwards is kind of the scene where it's just like, okay, we know exactly what just happened, and we can see the aftermath of it, so that when she gets her revenge, it's like, oh, I'm fucking here for this. Like, you're there to watch her go straight Terminator on these fucking dudes and like take them out. But it's also done in such an artistic, like well filmed way that I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that it's a female director, you know, like she knows she has that other POV from it, and it made for a film that brutal, yes, but absolutely stunning. It's a beautiful film. Like I've seen it 4 times, and I would never do that with a rape revenge film. Like twice tops is what I would get out of it. But this one, I would watch it a 5th and 6th time, like with no hesitation, you know?
Yeah, because like I wouldn't. It's not that I think that anyone needs to shy away from like that topic as something to present artistically or to put into a narrative, but it is how it's handled,
Yeah,
and the intention of the impact that the
for
film,
sure. Yeah,
you
the
know,
Im- the
yeah.
impact has to match the intention behind the filming. Like it's hard to say it like that, but hopefully that makes sense. Meaning that like the impact of it can be very strong and visceral, but the intention has to match that. The intention has to be strength. It has to be that visceral feeling of that catharsis that you get from seeing like these pieces of shit like get their last, their fucking just desserts, so to speak. Like you have to feel that, because if you don't, by the end of the movie, you feel gross. You're like, I didn't like anything about that. It was terrible. Whereas at the end of like this type of movie, Revenge, I'm like, fuck yeah, dude. I love that. Like that's the way that this ended up, you know? Um, but Gaspar Noe. So the movie that we're talking about today is a movie that I went and saw in the theaters the first time. And how many times have you seen Climax now?
I think I've seen it 2.5 times.
2.5 times.
This is the first time I saw it, I watched it the whole way through in one sitting. And something about Noe's work is that you do need a little bit of discipline, I think,
it's exhausting emotionally.
Yeah, like I think the best way to watch his films is on a screen in a theater where you are a captive audience.
Yeah.
And also go by yourself. That's what I recommend. Is like I love all of these films that I've seen, but they also feel like I said, they're hyper personal experiences. So what I'm going to take away from it is going to be totally different from what someone else is.
Right.
And I also want to be mindful of like maybe if I saw this, it would be with like a homie who I know
for sure. Yeah.
really well in terms of what their past traumas are.
Yeah.
Because it feels almost irresponsible to to watch one of his movies with invite somebody to watch one of his films who might be suffering from a trauma.
Sure.
And not just like around sexual assault. That's not that, because that's only part of it. His films really do deal with a menagerie of different suffering that people can go through.
Specifically this movie, that's one of the things so the reason I asked how many times you've seen it is because we have similar timelines on this. I watched it the first time I went to a theater, and it was when I had first gotten like the AMC A-list thing. Not a sponsor, but love you, AMC A-list. You fucking rock. But I had that, and I just gotten it for the first time, and I was kind of going ape shit on the movies that I could see. I was just like, I would never see this movie in the theater. I'm gonna fucking do it now because it's basically free. And then I went and saw it. I saw it by myself. And then at the end of the movie, I was like, what in the fuck did I just watch? Like, but it was in a way that was like, I just felt a gauntlet of emotions to the point where I can't quite understand what I just watched, because it was so much like just a barrage of feelings that it made it hard for me to like dissect the movie. But and it was also one of those things that was like, did I hate that movie or did I really love that movie? Like, I don't know yet. And then it took me like probably an hour. And then I was like, I fucking loved that movie. Like, that was a great movie. So I had to watch it a second time. And then when I watched it the second time and I actually started to pull stuff out of it, I was like, this film's a fucking masterpiece. But it's a very, very, very hard to watch masterpiece at certain points, you know?
Yeah. So everything you said, I agree with. And there's so many different ways to tackle this movie. I mean, it is Panic at the Disco meets Dante's Inferno. It is.
That's such a good reference and very good metaphor. True. Very true.
it's like the movie Go, but like this is like a cool dance movie, but that turns into a like phantasmagoric, nightmarish funhouse. You know,
Yeah.
it has two parts, right? And it is a Freudian, it's biblical, it's an urban legend come to life.
Yeah.
There's but okay. So what
It's
where
like it's like hell's interpretive dance routine. Like it's
yeah.
just, and here's one thing that's also very interesting. I want to point this out just before we like dig into the meat of this movie.
Mm-hmm.
It starts off with people getting interviewed about dancing, and you have to pay attention to what they're saying because it links into the experience that they go through as characters later on in the film. So like you really have to pay attention to that beginning part where like there's one dude where he's a gay guy, and they say, would you do anything for dance? And then he kind of gives it that look like, and then he says, what do you mean? And later on in the movie, you figure out like kind of where that's going to go. So you have to pay attention to those things. But also, the very first major filmed scene is that dance sequence that's all done in one shot. And it's chaotic in the most beautiful way. Like it's absolutely stunning, but it's so much happening at one time. And that literally was interpretive dance. It was all these dancers where he was like, I'm going to start filming and you guys go fucking crazy, which is what they did.
Okay, so Jonas, this is one of the themes of the film. One way that I looked at it was with this opening dance scene, which is incredibly beautiful. It is a profoundly unique moment in cinema. I don't think that I've seen a dance scene in modern cinema that in a mainstream film, to
Yeah.
call this mainstream or narrative film. This dance scene is astonishing, and it reminded me of biblically of the Tower of Babel, right?
Oh,
Because
yeah. Yeah.
what we see is all of these diverse styles from dancers who are French, Algerian, German. There's a Muslim dancer. And it's men, women, queer. There's trans performers who are in this as well.
Mm-hmm.
So you see like all different body shapes and different styles of dance coming together to create this one celebratory piece. And to me, in a spiritual way, that dance piece that they all bring together is a metaphor of like the unity of humanity, but presented through the medium of dance. And when we watched Enter the Void, the first scene in Enter the Void is the main character smoking DMT
Yeah.
and having a psychedelic experience where he is getting that ecstatic feeling of unity with everything, right? Through all of the hallucinations in his mind's eye before things fall apart. So I feel like this movie and Enter the Void rhyme for Gaspar Noe's work, because he is showing this wonderful celebration of what we can do when we come together. And then the nightmare of the film is the second half when
Yeah.
things fall apart, right?
Yeah. And that's what was so interesting about it is like, everything you said is right on point, by the way. Very good way of putting it, because this movie is like when you look at a movie as a horror film, this is kind of also a question that comes over up on AGHP is what's the difference between thriller and horror? And this movie is it's visually provocative for sure. Like there's a couple of parts in it that you would visually consider quote unquote horror. Like there's at one point where a woman catches on fire. But like when she catches on fire, the fact that she's on fire is the least horrific aspect of it. It's like which is so fucked up because like it's what she's going through at the time, and then all the and then also the realization that she has of oh fuck I'm on fire, and then her emotional reaction to it is what's the more horrifying thing, because her acting is done so well that you can see like the feeling of I have to fix this immediately or I'm gonna die. Like, it's not like just a, oh fuck, I'm on fire. It's like, this is gonna kill me. I have to put this out. How do I do this? There's nothing around me to put this out, and also I'm on drugs. Like, so it's all those things. The thing that's interesting about when you mentioned about Enter the Void, whenever anybody tells me what's it like to take DMT, because I have taken it, I literally just tell them watch Enter the Void. Like, because it is that in your own way. So, like, people say, is DMT fun? Absolutely not. It's not a fun drug. That's not what DMT is supposed to be. It's not supposed to be a drug that you go out and party with your friends. You're like, we're going to take some DMT and go to another fucking dimension. Like, that's not at all what it is.
Yeah. You may feel ecstasy. You may feel ecstatic. You might have profound insights that bring you joy, but it is not guaranteed.
No, and you're going to feel the hurt. You're going to feel the hurt right along with it,
Yeah, it's only part of it. And that's like Gaspar's work as well. I think when you watch like a lot of other horror movies or any other types, action movies, or like even the rape revenge, which you brought up earlier, the point of that, of a rape revenge film, is to leave you feeling satisfied and also feel like your lust for revenge can be sublimated in this appropriate way.
Right.
And when you watch an action film, you're like, oh, it's going to work out for the heroes. Or you watch a comedy, you're going to elicit laughter.
Yeah.
But I think with Gaspar Noé's work, you are almost there to embrace or to receive profound human truths that are both terrifying, but can be insightful and can also bring you joy. Because this film specifically, I would just cut out that first 10-minute dance scene and share it with friends. I've done this.
Yeah.
Or dancers, or who work out, or who are like former b-boys, or who like going to raves with me back in the day.
Fuck
and
yeah.
I show them that, and they're like, oh, this is beautiful, this is great. And it's like, yeah, within this horrific film, there's these little jewels that are just beautiful.
Absolutely. And that's also another thing that's interesting about this movie, is it does character development in a way that I thought was kind of ingenious, because the way that he did it is he framed it in the first off, you get introduced to the characters in the beginning interview things that are just like a question or two a piece, and you understand who the people are pretty quick. You've got the queer kid who is like dances everything to him. You've got the brother and sister who are there because their parents want them to be. You've got the German girl who's there because she was escaping her school because everybody was fucked up on drugs, and she just loves to dance. And then you've got people who are chorus dancers, and then you've got people who you got one of my favorite characters, the big gay DJ. Like, he was one of my favorites. He was dope. Yeah, Daddy was dope. So like, you got him in there too. So you have these people that you get introduced to right in the beginning before the big dance scene. So you have this thing that gets planted into your brain of like, these are the people that I just met, and here's this really cool shit that all of them can do at the same time. And then it starts to break down into specific character development of all these different people. And each one of them is a very specific type of character. You know what I mean? Like, you've got the toxically masculine dudes that are just into fucking. Like, that's all they want. They're just there for pussy. Like, and they say, yeah. And they say that a lot, like, they're always like, I'm just here for the pussy, dude. And like, just blah, blah, blah. And then you've got the couple that is the brother sister, where
Giselle
you've got
and Tyler.
Yes. So you got them where Tyler's super overbearing, and then Giselle is kind of like wanting to escape this overbearing nature of Tyler, who I also feel like is probably a little bit of similar to their father in the sense, because something happens with them that also makes me think that there was some abuse back home that she was trying to escape. So you got that. You've got the thing with Daddy, who they call him that, but also he kind of is like the daddy of the whole group, and then you've got the main star, who she kind of goes all over the place to the different people. And I don't know why her name is escaping me right now.
It's I believe it's Selva.
Yeah, Selva. I always kept on thinking Selma, but yeah, it's Selva.
So I think Selva is the coordinator of the dance routines, right?
Yes.
She's the choreographer. And
Yes.
she's the boss. And Emmanuel is the house, like sort of the resident
She's like
caregiver,
the den mother.
den mother. So she'd be like the production manager, maybe, because she was the one who was supposed to get a bus to get them at the end, like
Yeah.
the next day.
And she
And
also has a small child.
yeah, Tito.
Tito plays a pivotal part in the nightmare.
Okay. So can I do a quick summary for anybody that hasn't seen this then?
Yeah, dude,
Okay.
summarize the shit out of it.
All right, hell yeah. So what we're seeing is the movie begins on the last day of a 3-day intensive training for a final production. And it's taking place in an isolated abandoned church that has been repurposed as a dance studio. And it's a really spooky church. It's snowing outside and they're in the middle of nowhere. And they're celebrating these dancers who have all come together for this production from all over Europe, basically. They are now celebrating because they put on a good, they're done rehearsing. And they drink some spiked sangria.
Yes.
And we don't know who has spiked the sangria, but it is full of heroic doses of LSD.
Dude, there's so much LSD in the sangria.
And from whatever your perspective is, either hilarity or extreme paranoia and terror ensue as they progressively hallucinate more and more, and like the drugs take hold.
Real quick, I want to cut you off there for a second, because for anybody that has not taken LSD, I kind of want to do a comparison here, because I've done a lot of drugs in my life, and when people think LSD, I think all they think about is the visual like splendor that happens when you take LSD. Like you see like the really bright colors, or like, oh my God, there's a goblin in front of me, or like, whatever. Like it's a very brushed over hallucinogen, and it's almost presented in a comical way at times, or like a very traditional 70s psychedelic type of way. And the best way for me to tell you about LSD, if you've never taken it, but maybe you've taken mushrooms is like the euphoric hallucinogen. So it's the one that you get the body high from. It's the one that you get the euphoria from. And then you'll get some visuals sometimes. And if you take a large dose of it, you can get like crazy visuals. But for the most part, mushrooms is the happy hallucinogen. It's the one that people use for therapy. It's the one that people use to kind of detox the soul, so to speak. LSD is that, but it's so unpredictable, because LSD affects you on a soul level. So whatever it is that you happen to be going through at the time, LSD turns up to 1,000. So LSD is not a therapeutic hallucinogen. It is a roulette wheel. And you hope you land on what you were betting on, because if you don't, and the quote unquote bad trip that you can get from LSD can be very bad. And that's what this movie kind of illustrates, because LSD, again, because it's an unpredictable drug, you're not quite sure what you're going to get. But when it goes bad, it goes very bad, because your brain latches onto the fact that, oh, fuck, something's happening. And then LSD kind of takes hold of that and just turns that up exponentially. And that's where this roller coaster goes. So yeah, I just wanted to tell people LSD and mushrooms, stuff like that, like they're very, very different hallucinogens, and LSD is a much more unpredictable one.
Yeah, and then there's also set and setting, which people will bring up when it comes to drugs. Knowing that you're taking them is
right.
Part of it, rather than having it sprung upon you.
Huge part of it.
And then setting, being around, people that you're comfortable with, or in a situation where you're more at ease. That's right. Also important. And prepping for things is important as well, like not having something sprung upon you as a surprise. And then I've also seen
surprise acid is never good. Just so we're clear.
Dosage is also something to take into account. There is the idea of microdosing, or using these drugs therapeutically in a setting with like psychologists, or in controlled studies. But like they're just drinking however much has been spiked into their punch bowls. And this movie on the, like, you as an artist, Jonas, like, I could relate to these dancers, not so much from the perspective of being a dancer, but from the idea of, I don't know if you've ever done like theater and worked with an ensemble or a troupe.
Sure. Yeah.
But anytime that we're working with a troupe, or even we're working with other comedians on a lineup or a tour, you know, they're all of our egos come into play, and watching these artists and with their egos, right? Like when we see them interviewed at first and we're introduced to them, we're seeing the professional version of themselves that is striving to or auditioning to be part of this troupe.
Yeah.
And then we see them actually dance together, and we see the beautiful thing that they're able to make.
Right.
It's this celebration of art. And then the next scene is them drinking. Next portion of the film is them drinking in small clusters with one another.
Right.
In that, you get to see almost like the truer politics of what it means to be an artist in a group. Like, you see them talking shit about each other.
You see the cliques.
You see the cliques.
Yeah.
And it's not that they're all talking shit about each other. That's not what I'm saying. But you see a couple of them, you know, scheming, or David specifically, the fuckboy of the group.
Yeah. He's definitely the situation of the group.
Yeah. And he is very specifically scheming he's sleeping with Selva, or trying to, who is the choreographer. And so he's using his sexuality to, it's like trying to sleep with the booker or the gatekeeper or the manager. That's 100%. What he's doing. And so the other men see that. And also the women see that, because the women can't use their sexuality on a straight woman like that.
Right.
So it is almost like jumping through. You can see why they might, after they take some acid,
for sure,
aggression towards him that would be, you know, when you're sober, those feelings are repressed.
100%. Yeah.
And so that's just one example.
Who's in that, real quick? Who's the one that he is talking to most of the time? The guy's name. Because they're two different toxically masculine dudes in two different ways. Because David is the one that's trying to sleep with Selva to kind of get ahead, and also he thinks she's attractive, but he's also very much trying to like get ahead. Whereas the other dude is like the walking hard on. He just wants to fuck. Like he's it was the bigger black dude that did like the popping dancing.
Cyborg, who
yes, okay, yeah, because he does the robot. He does the robot later on. Okay.
Cyborg and his cousin, I think, are dance partners, and it's Cyborg and Bats.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Cyborg, he in the earlier interviews, he talks about how he had gotten in altercations, he's gotten in fights. You know, so I feel like maybe he comes from like the streets in a different way.
He's presented that way. Yeah.
Yeah. And
I believe he's French.
Absolutely. And these are all like, you know, I think race is a big component in this movie, in that this takes place in France, right? So when you look at France's history with colonialism, you're going to have like, these are all the children of African immigrants of colonies. And these are all the children of, and then there's Omar, who is Arab or like very light African. And he is the first one to be persecuted. Yeah. Because the group like figures out that they're tripping, and because Omar is like he doesn't drink, and so the subtext is, for me, was, oh well, he's Muslim, he's practicing, so that's why he's not drinking. Right. But they all freak out because they think that he spiked the punch
because he's not drinking.
Yeah. And so like you see here, it's like, you know, France has a huge problem. I was just in Paris, and they like have a huge problem with like Islam.
Yeah.
There. So you can see when a crisis occurs that it would be part of their culture to be like, oh, the problem in the group, the person we have to kick out is the Muslim.
Right. Here's also something, because you just got back from Paris. This is interesting.
Yeah.
So I think when people are presented with what France looks like, specifically Paris, they're shown a very small section of Paris, because I've been to Paris also. And the section that they're shown, like around the Eiffel Tower, around the Louvre, and like stuff like that, that's like this very pretty, very presented nicely to tourists type of Paris, and like, stuff like that. Once you venture outside of those parts of Paris, there's some dirty shit there. Like there's some grimy ass parts of Paris. So if Cyborg is a dude that grew up in the streets of Paris, perhaps, like, I'll say perhaps, even an outskirt of Paris, there's a very real possibility that him as a character went through some real wild shit, because Paris is not all sunshine and kittens. Like, there's parts of Paris that are like downright dangerous, and it's easy to stumble into them too. Like, you just have to go one street down and you're like, oh fuck, I'm in the wrong part of Paris. Like,
yeah, man. I mean, there's so many ways you can interpret or read into this movie and the backstory of the characters, because we don't know that much about them, but you can infer. And like, to speak to your point about Paris, like one of my favorite French films is called La Haine, The Hate.
Oh yeah. I know what that is.
La Haine came out in the 90s, and the film stars three young men. One is Arab, one is Jewish, and one is African, like from the more southern Africa.
Yeah.
So they all grow up in a housing project in the suburbs of Paris. And when we say suburbs here, that's like nice. But the suburbs of Paris is, the center of the city looks great. And as you move out, that's where they put their immigrants. And
yeah.
And the film takes place the day after a riot against the police because they had shot a young black man or a young Arab man. And you see how gritty, like La Haine is an amazing hip hop film. It falls into that like almost like a do the right thing for France. And
for sure. That's a great point, actually. That makes a lot of sense.
So when you think about like the context of where these people are growing up, these dancers, so like let's say you're straight and you're in this dance community, there is the homophobia of the straight male dancers.
Sure.
Who are constantly, because there is like casual homophobia in this film where not the film is not homophobic, but the characters are, because this is an amazingly queer film, embracing all different walks of life.
There's a huge queer representation in the cast.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of people that are very specifically homophobic.
Yeah.
As a part of their character arc.
Exactly. And part of that is, them because sexuality is so much part of like the community, and like this is a very physical and kinetic way of art form. It's dance,
Right.
So they're like, when like characters like Cyborg or not even him, but Bats is like more homophobic, it's like, right. Oh, that is also to show to like your coworkers that you're not into it. And not in like, how do I?
It's macho posturing is what
exactly.
it is.
It's macho posturing. It's exaggerated macho posturing. And then you've got characters that are like a lot more like fluid, that are like, I'll go both ways. I'll go whichever way gets me an opportunity. And then you've got gay virgin characters in this who have crushes and are. I think it's just a great film around different conversations about gender and preferences.
I fully agree. And that's also the other thing that's kind of cool about it. Like, I think that's just a very cool thing in general, is that the movie across the board presents so many different walks of life and so many different backgrounds without giving you all the information yourself. It gives you just enough of their backgrounds for you to be able to assess who they are and like what they've gone through. And then once the sangria kicks in and you start to see those things come out in the more darker senses of them, that's where you start to really see, like, it's almost like a barrage of therapy sessions for each character. Like, each one of them comes at you with this like, oh fuck, that's their abuse. Oh fuck, that's the skeleton in their closet. Oh fuck, that's the thing they're going through. But the person that I felt for the most. Like, it was hard not to feel for every character for the most part. Like, there's a couple of them that are straight up pieces of shit, but for the most part, it was hard not to feel for almost every character. But specifically Emmanuel and Tito, that
Wow.
ripped my fucking soul out.
So, again, this film, if you look at it through the lens of like the art, but what does it mean to be an artist? It's like Emmanuel is was a dancer and is now the den mother for this troupe. And the reason that she's not a dancer anymore is because she got pregnant and decided to keep the child.
Yeah.
So Tito is there on set with us, and we love cute little Tito. But the film is like there is a tension, I think, where she is slightly resentful of all of these people who get to continue being artists. And I'm sure that there were dancers, and I'm sure there were dancers that thought that Emmanuel made the wrong decision to keep her child.
Yeah.
But then B, might even feel relief that she had a child because now she's not competition anymore. So I think those are just under the surface. You see these tensions. And to your point that it's so tragic, what happens with them.
And remember, and by the way, remember that we are spoiling everything about this movie. Like per usual with the Grindhouse episode, we're gonna spoil the fuck out of everything.
Yeah.
And that's okay. But one thing I want to mention is that there's a very real universal feeling that you get from when you see Emmanuel just have the stress of motherhood, of just trying to watch her kid while also trying to quote unquote watch all of these adults, so to speak. But she's got to pay attention to Tito because he's like 6 years old or some shit. So he's running around, he's touching things, he's talking to people, he's going into the rooms of this weird abandoned fucking school. Like, and she's got to do that while she also makes sure that these people are staying safe. And that's where the emotional part of it hit me so hard, because if it wasn't for the fact that she was stretched so thin, with both being stressed about watching him and also stressed about watching the rest of the dancers, there's a very pivotal thing that never would have happened, which would have changed the entire course of everything for her, specifically for her and Tito. And it's when he sneaks off when she's busy trying to watch somebody else and gets a drink of the sangria. And he doesn't even just get a drink, like he drinks a fucking glass of it. Like he drinks a cup of this acid sangria.
Yeah. And it's if she had money for a babysitter, if she if I don't know, like there's so many different things. Like when you're an artist, your life is so tenuous already.
Right.
So to have to juggle as what I assume being a single mother.
I think it's pretty clear that she's a single mom. At least to me, it was pretty clear that she was a single mom.
Yeah, because Tito's got to be there. Tito, instead of being with the dad or another partner, like Tito's got to be there late at night in this church with these people in the middle of nowhere. And it's not like this is a dance troupe that's been together forever and where everyone is all friends. And I think that's where some of this like paranoia comes from. And also because I was raised, I know like my parents both worked all the time. And so I was raised by a village. In a lot of ways, I trust a lot of adults in my life because my parents left me for, sometimes days with adults who were their friends that were cool. And if like this artistic community, these dancers were actually a community that had known each other for a while, maybe it would be easier to have Tito there. But what's really scary is once the acid kicks in, that you realize like, oh, these are all fucking psychopaths that don't know each other. So you can see the real dread. Like, what would it be like if you placed your child in a community of strangers and had to hope for the best?
Absolutely. And that's also, so like if we start breaking down the nightmares that happen between each character, I want to start with Emmanuel and Tito because there's something that's very specific about her nightmare. Because what happens when she notices that the acid is in the sangria that it's spiked, she immediately goes into protective mom mode.
Right.
And is like, I have to save my child. I'm going to put him in this room. And the room that she puts him in is an electrical closet because it's kind of like the only room that can really be isolated from the other people.
Yeah.
And her immediate maternal instinct is, I have to protect my child. I'm going to put him in here. And he kind of freaks out. And she's like, no, it's okay. Just go to sleep. Like, no big deal. And she's kind of like, she's there to soothe him. She's there to do the motherly thing. And she puts him in there, and at first, she doesn't lock the door. At first, she just puts him in there and says, just go to sleep. Like, just, lay down. It's okay. But then when the LSD hits her, she goes into the psychotic, I have to protect my child thing, because if this is hitting me, that means it's going to hit him. And it also means that it's going to hit everybody else in this room. And he's the most important thing to me as a mom. So I've got to protect him from everybody else. So she locks him in the room.
Yeah, man. So I'm gonna say something about like LSD. Allegedly, I've taken a lot of it, and I would say that yeah, man. People do freak out and stuff. However, once you realize what's going on, it's so crazy that even a small group of these dancers couldn't be like, okay, we're all having a bad trip. Let's sit down, let's sit down,
right,
and just breathe.
For sure. And this is also funny because I don't know what your LSD history is, but I'm going to say that we've both taken, we'll say a good amount. And when I first took it, the first time I ever took acid, it was spiked.
Yeah.
Okay. So I didn't know that I was taking it, but here's the thing. My mom had prepared me basically for this day, without knowing it, because she had told me stories of when she grew up in the 70s and how LSD was. And she like talked to me about the experiences of drugs in the event that I ever take them.
Yeah.
So that I was prepared for it. Like, and it's because my mom kind of knew. My mom said something to me early on. She said, no matter what I tell you, you're going to do what you want to do, whether I tell you not to or not. So the best thing that I can do as a mom is prepare you for the experience if it happens. So I went to this party and I ended up getting spiked with 6 hits of acid. And it was 6 drops of acid on a sugar cube. And it was put into my drink by accident. And it was because the person that wanted to take it did want somebody to put it in their drink, but they didn't want to do it themselves because they didn't want to accidentally overdose it. They knew they wanted to take 6 hits, but they wanted to make sure they didn't overdo it. They wanted to make sure that they didn't accidentally put too much, et cetera, et cetera. So when I found out I took the acid, the guy told me, have you ever taken it before? I said, no. He goes, do you know what to expect? And I said, sort of. So when it hit me, I knew that shit was about to go down because I started to feel certain things. And I was like, okay, time to make sure I'm calm. Time to make sure that we're in a good place, Yeah. And then when the wild shit started to happen, it was fun. It wasn't like, because I knew what I was about to walk into. Like I had a conversation with a poster of The Crow. Like I straight up had a full-blown conversation with dead Brandon Lee. Like, and somebody was like, hey, Jonas, how you doing? I was like, I'm good. They're like, what are you doing? I was like, talking to The Crow. And they were like, how's he doing? I was like, I mean, he's fucking dead, but aside from that, he's cool. And they were like, all right, he's fine. Like, because I was very understanding of the fact that me having this conversation was not real, quote unquote.
Yeah, you were like, oh, reality is elastic right now.
Exactly. Yeah.
I can disassociate, or if not, I can give myself a little critical distance to realize that I'm not in control and that I can't trust my senses.
For sure.
So let's chill out and
now,
wait.
On the flip side of that, a seasoned LSD user that was a friend of mine at the party saved my life, literally. I'll tell you how. I went out to my car because I was like, when you take LSD, you have cravings for sugar and citrus a lot. That's kind of a thing that your body craves. So I was thinking to myself, I was like, I want some orange juice or whatever. So I went out to go get in my car and I was at the peak of my trip. Like I was fucking there,
Yeah.
So I go out to get in my car and this guy who is a seasoned LSD user sees me leave the apartment, sees me go out to my car. And he clicks into protective LSD user mode and goes, this is not a good idea. I'm going to go down there with him. He gets in the car with me, and I remember this vividly because he was like, what are you doing, man? I was like, I'm going to go to the store and get some orange juice. He was like, great idea. Do you mind if I play some music? And I was like, sure. I was like, yeah, no big deal. So he puts in The End by The Doors.
Yeah.
And I immediately I go, I don't want to be here anymore. Let's go back upstairs. He goes, that's a great idea. So we go back upstairs. And then right when we get back upstairs, he puts on something soothing.
Yes.
And like has a conversation with me, and like it immediately de-escalates the situation, and I'm back to happy land. Everything's cool. But for that 30 seconds or whatever that The End clicked on, I was like, get me the fuck out of this room. I don't want to be here. So I went back upstairs, and sure enough, that made me literally avoid my car for the duration of my trip. Like I was like, oh no, that's the dark place. I'm staying away from there, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, it was a pro move. It was a real pro move on his part.
Having a guide to talk you down, you know, and you have this in like the shamanic traditions too. That's what the shaman's there for when you're on a vision quest.
Yeah.
Keep guiding you and talk you through things. And yeah, so I don't think that the LSD experiences have to be horrific. and
they
what
can be great. They can totally be great.
Gaspar Noe say, I believe I was listening to another podcast where they talked about this. I think it was The Evolution of Horror.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's a solid, very solid podcast.
I really loved it. And one anecdote they brought up was that in an interview, he said that this was a metaphor for alcohol, not a metaphor for psychedelics.
I could see that.
Because he basically said, so many people, artists that he knew and people in his life the alcohol would bring out alcoholism would bring out the worst, basest parts of them.
Sure.
And so, when I think of psychedelics, I often feel like they leave people better than those rupturing, terrifying moments that you have under psychedelics leave you better when you come out, sort of like humbled or with new insights.
Of course, absolutely.
With alcohol, like we're seeing this film in stages of like drinks. How many different drinks of sangria. And when they get to that blackout, it's the blackout drunks that even when I'm out doing shows, and if I'm out too late, I don't want to talk to people who I know have had like 3 more drinks than I have.
No.
Because they're not going to remember what they're saying. And B, the likelihood that there's going to be volatility because they're on autopilot, like blackout drunk can do anything. Because they're not really like following, they have no inhibitions anymore. And that's what I was seeing with this film is like, this is more what if you gave people amphetamines and vodka?
Yeah.
Acid.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's like, so talking about the alcoholism thing, it makes sense because like, I've been in recovery now for a little over 5 years, but I'm not a program recovery person. Meaning the sense that like I don't think that sobriety necessarily means that you can't do any mind-altering substance. Sobriety to me is abstaining from the thing that was killing you or the thing that was destroying you. So like for me, it was booze and coke. So I was doing booze and coke together were a nightmare combination. And also
that's amphetamines and vodka.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I was bringing this up because it's like it's also like it's weird because when you take them both at the same time, you have a substance fight inside of your body because you have a depressant, and you have an amphetamine that are in a fist fight in your body. And then when one of them loses, the other one takes over. So it's like you can have 6, 7, 8 shots of whatever, but if you do 2 rails of coke on top of it, those 8 shots no longer feel like 8 shots. They feel like maybe you took 1. But cocaine has such a small shelf life inside of your body that when it wears off, all of a sudden, all 8 of those shots are back and they're pissed. So like, they're like,
why'd you leave us out in the cold?
Exactly.
Like Omar.
Yeah, dude. They're like, you locked me out, you fucking son of a bitch. So the thing that's interesting about that, how it translates to Climax, is that like, I am a proponent of using hallucinogens and psychedelics in a therapeutic way and in a fun way. If you're doing it safely, fucking go out, have your fun. I'm all about that.
Yeah.
Same thing with weed. You know, like if you fucking enjoy smoking weed, I'm not going to tell somebody that they're, like
Yeah. The
fucking smoking weed is whatever. But with specifically how it translates to Climax, there's certain characters. I'll use Selva as a good example.
Mhm.
When she's walking down a hallway, her visual like her visual change, like as far as her POV goes, is very much a blackout alcoholic visual and not an acid visual, not an LSD visual. Like the tunnel vision, the whole like changing of the room, the shifting of like the perception of the room, and like that whole like off kilter feeling in her POV is very much alcoholism. Like that's
absolutely.
straight up. I had too much booze too quick, and now I'm getting the spins, and that's what that is.
Yeah, the LSD is a literary device for this movie rather than what LSD really is, because you can, if you took this literally, then this film becomes a just say no after school special film.
It's the
Goes into like,
dare program from hell.
yeah, it goes into the idea of the urban legend of the kid who took a tab of acid and thought he was orange juice and then thought he could fly.
Right,
And
right.
went to like, the 15th story of a building and killed himself. And
Yeah.
which doesn't happen.
No, no, it's not how that works.
Yeah. So he was already insane.
Right. And
That.
that's kind of what makes sense with these characters too, because if you think about it in the sense that when you black out when you're drinking,
Mm-hmm.
the absolute worst parts of you come out. So like if you have a temper, or if you are violent, or if you are predatory, or if you are like those things that are inside of you that are shitty, those come out during blackouts. They generally don't come out even at the high level of drinking. Like if you're at a certain amount, but you're still relatively lucid, you still have somewhat of a control over it, only in the sense that like you can kind of be like, oh, getting to that place, I should go somewhere else. Whereas when you black out, you wake up to carnage a lot of times. A lot of times you wake up to like, oh, I punched holes in the wall, or oh, I called my partner the worst thing imaginable. Your projections come out, which is what happens in this movie. So
Yeah. Thank
it's
you
a,
for saying that.
yeah,
Projections coming out.
that's what it is. So these projections come out in this movie. So when you experience each individual nightmare from these people, the nightmare is not a acid induced nightmare. It very much is, like you were saying, if it's a metaphorical thing for alcoholism, that is nail on the fucking head.
Yeah, and it is the hell is like these people who've learned to tightly control their bodies and tightly control their professional state, unraveling and having their projections possess them, really.
That's a
And
good term for it.
it is and the catalyst to all this is our German friend Psyche, and her name is she's named after the Greek goddess of spirit, so, and also psychology and
Right.
psychedelics. So
Yep.
Psyche is really possessing these people, and when she pees on the floor, it's like breaking water, and
Yeah.
that is the beginning of their spirits basically coming out, and them becoming possessed by their spirits in an unhealthy way.
Well, and that's also interesting too, because if you look at it from that frame of reference, when she pisses on the floor, that sends everybody else into a little bit of a fear spiral, because it kind of does, because they look
Yeah.
at her like, yo, you're peeing on the floor, like what the fuck? And she was like, whoops. So everybody else kind of goes like, something's going on, she's peeing on the floor, these people, and then they all of a sudden start to notice things that are happening in the room. So it starts the domino effect, because she pees on the floor and they're like, oh, these two are fighting, oh, she's crying, oh, these two are shady, oh, like this and this and this, and it starts like all the little pieces, the dots start to connect. And that's where we also get to somebody, I think it's Selva, who kind of goes like, I feel weird, Like, I'm starting to feel weird. And then as soon as she says it, then all of a sudden other people start to go, I feel weird too. Oh my God, me too. Blah, 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 blah. And then you get to, I already blanked on his name, the Muslim dude that's not drinking.
Omar. Yeah.
Omar. Yeah. Yeah. He's kind of like, I don't know what's going on. Like, I feel fine. And they were like, it's the sangria. And they start to look at it and they're like, it's the sangria. Somebody spiked the sangria. And this is where I feel like the first climax happens, because when everybody says that, that's when it goes to Emmanuel and she's like, oh no, oh my God, my son. And she looks down and he's got a glass of the sangria in his hand and he's drinking it. And she's like, oh no. And that's where like for me, that was where the first emotional climax hits, because that goes from like 0 to 1,000 in fear, and that sets off a whole different wave of oh fuck across the entire room.
Absolutely. And it's in how fear is also a motivator to form us into a collective, but as a collective to like push Omar out the door for one, and then the child. I don't know, man. I mean that's such a tough. That is probably the toughest part of this movie is and it's not even like that you see anything terrible happen to a kid, but
you do hear it.
But it's off screen.
Yeah.
Hearing a child tripping balls in a room, thinking that things are crawling all over him, and eventually electrocuting himself by touching the whatever it is, the
lever, because he thinks that the lever on the box is what'll open the door to get him out of there.
And so you don't see any of this. I want to make sure the audience, our listeners, know that.
No.
See a kid get barbecued.
You see plenty of other stuff, but Gaspar was like, you know what? We're not going to show the kid going through the electric chair, but we're going to show you a lot of other stuff, but we're not going to show you that one.
Yeah. I think about that scene a lot. That's that's probably the most disturbing part, is when the lights go out and you know exactly why.
Yeah, so this thing was so fucked up about that part, because the lights go out and his screaming stops, and it happens at the same time. So even though you get this barrage of sensory experience, you just go, oh fuck, the kid's dead. And then like that's where Emmanuel completely loses it. Like, she at that point realizes what's happened while she's also under the influence, and she knows that she put her kid in a place that was, I mean, that was where he died, and she knew that she did that. She knew that, and it was because she lost the key, because she was freaking out, she was paranoid, she was full of fear. She lost the key, she didn't know where it was. And like the people that was the other fucked up part of that whole sequence with her, is that while that was happening, the other people in the room were talking about it mockingly in the background. They were like, yo, he's fucking dead. Or like, they were like, Tito's gonna fry and stuff like that. Like, they were saying it like it was just no big deal.
That's why this feels less like an LSD thing and more like alcohol, because what the other thing is LSD can enhance empathy, and a sense of connection, and everyone in this space, well, they're all on their own personal trip, and that means that they might be aware that a child has just been electrocuted, but exactly to your point of like, what is your observation of that minus empathy? And it's simply, oh, Tito's fried.
Right, yeah. Removing the emotion from it, that like the kid's fried. Like, like there's just no emotional connection to it at all. And the only person that emotionally was connected to all of it was Selva.
Yeah,
she had an emotional connection to almost everybody in the room from an empathetic side.
Because she was the choreographer.
Yeah,
she had she recruited all of them, so she was the basically their boss in this.
Yeah, and she was also kind of like the heart of the whole thing. So like she's
Professor X.
Yeah, very much the Professor X, because she was going around. Even the people that were shitty to her, she was still cared. She still gave a fuck, and that was to a fault. Like, she cared to the point where ultimately it was not good for her. Like to the point where she was less protective of her own, like, her own self. But she truly cared about them no matter how gross the person was. But I want to jump nightmares here really quick to another nightmare. To let me think of what her name was. I have it right here. To Lou.
Ooh,
so
Lou's nightmare.
Lou's nightmare was pretty wild because she confides in Selva that she's not drinking because she's pregnant.
Uh-oh, bad move.
So this becomes a thing where the thing that they did to Omar, where they kicked him out, and so now they think they've removed the problem. You go into the back room where the bedrooms are, and now you have Lou, who's talking to Selva, who's confiding in her, saying that she's pregnant. She's like, you can't tell anybody though, because if you do, and they find out that I wasn't drinking, they're going to think it was me. And then I believe you have Dom who comes in and overhears it. And Dom is based off of her name, which if you look at all the names of the characters, all these things make sense. But she is a big, domineering drag performer, drag dancer. And Dom is huge. Dom's a big one. And when Dom what's that?
Strong.
Yeah, very big and strong. So when Dom hears Lou say that she's pregnant, she calls her bullshit on it. And she says, no, you're not. Right. And she throws a knee right into her abdomen, like right underneath the belly button. And it causes a traumatic event to happen where she like bleeds a little bit, and like, it's a pain thing and like physical pain thing. But the physical pain reaction that she has to it also, you can tell, is an emotional reaction, because you can tell that she feels literally physically on the inside that Dom just killed her baby.
That's
like,
right.
Straight up, like she just caused a miscarriage with how she did it.
Yeah. And it's interesting because Lou had been wrestling with the idea of whether or not to keep a child, and was looking towards Emmanuel and Emmanuel's situation with Tito earlier in this. And she might have not kept it on her own, but this was like the absence of choice. It was
right.
The brutal termination of this pregnancy, possibly through Dawn's violence.
Yeah, it's almost like Lou was the personification of how women in America have to deal with their own reproductive rights. Yeah. Because you have Dawn coming in and removing the whole idea of choice from the factor. And when you do that, the results are bad. Like when you remove, like regardless of how it is, when you remove the possibility of choice when it comes to a woman's bodily autonomy, the results of that are bad. Like just no way to cut it. This is just a very violent version of that.
This is like a reason that I really like Gaspar Noé's work, and in both this and Enter the Void, is that he also presents things as not like he's morally gray in a lot of ways, where mothers don't necessarily, like, they might love their children, but they still regret having them.
Sure.
Or showing that, a pregnancy is not like magic, or everyone's ambivalent the whole time. Right. Like, it could go either way.
Pregnancy is not necessarily a blessing, is kind of the way he presents it. Like sometimes it's an oops, and sometimes it's am I ready for this?
Yeah, so taboos, he really hits on these things that are taboos in a way that a lot of comedians who are edgelords think they're doing.
Right.
Like really doing it well, because
right.
It feels gray.
Yeah.
Or like it lives in that murky gray.
It absolutely does. And so that's another nightmare. And also, once that thing happens, once she gets kneed in the gut and she starts to realize that she basically has just lost that baby, she now goes into a violent psychosis and starts to like cut at herself and stab at herself, like physically stab at herself. And that's like one of the more violent scenes that's in the movie. And that leads to the thing where she's on fire, where I was telling you about. So she's the one that catches on fire.
It's not her that catches on fire. It's the coke girl who catches on fire.
Oh, Gazelle, right?
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
not Giselle. Giselle is in an incestuous thing with her brother.
No. Giselle. Okay, not Giselle. Gazelle. Because
Okay.
Gazelle is one of the white dancers.
All right. Yeah.
Um,
So, well, she catches her hair catches on fire, and what's crazy about that is that it is not the center of our attention.
no,
It's
it's the
simply
background.
it's in the background, and that to me, man, I guess
That's
that's
while Selva's losing her shit. Selva's losing her shit, and then I think isn't
yeah.
it Dom that pushes her into the fire, like when Dom's coming back through the room?
It might be.
I think it is. I think Dom was kind of like the chaos demon of those things, where Dom's just coming through like "fuck you" and like pushes her into the fire, and then this is all while Selva is trying to be the choreographer. She's trying to control these different fires that are happening so she can put them out, and she
Yeah.
can't.
Yeah.
And
That's
also
a
if you
brilliant
go,
insight. Good.
yeah,
Yeah.
like so as she's doing it, that's also goes along with the whole alcoholism thing, because if you're the person who brought the rest of your group out to a party, you kind of feel responsible for them. And
You
if
want to
they
hold their hair while they're vomiting.
right, and if they start to do fucked up shit, you're the one that they will look at and be like, you fucking brought them here, look what they did, you know. So she's also got this whole thing where she's trying to control all of them. And this also goes back to the dude that was trying to sleep with her the whole time,
Mhm.
whose name slips me
David.
again. David. So the thing with David is that he gets turned on not by her, but by two of the other guys who like start painting swastikas and shit on him. Like,
So he's making out. What happens is he's making out with Giselle, the sister,
yes, yeah.
and
And then the
also
brother loses his shit.
and the young gay man is trying to get with him as well, and he's pushing the young gay man off. So he's alienating that possible ally,
Yep.
and he's pissing
There's some
off the
little
brother.
veiled homophobia for you there.
Yeah,
Get your gay intrusive thoughts away from me.
he's pissing off the brother, by hooking up with Giselle, and these other men who have seen him and heard him talking about how he's trying to have sex with everyone there,
Yeah.
um, like stomp him basically.
They stomped the shit out of him.
Yeah, yeah. Break a bottle over his head. He's definitely got a concussion.
At least, yeah. At a certain point, I thought he was dead. Like I
Same.
thought they had killed him.
But he gets back up later, so
Yeah.
that's why. But it's I don't know if you've seen the movie or have you ever gone to Sleep No More, which is a
Oh yeah.
so Sleep No
The
More.
immersive performance thing in New York.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I've had an opportunity to go a couple times as gifts. When people come visit, they always want me to go with them to sleep no more when they come to New York.
Right.
But it's like a 5-story warehouse that got turned into the space inside looks like a haunted house. That's it. It looks like a haunted house from the 1920s. And they hired dancers, professional dancers, to perform an interpretive, non-verbal version of Macbeth. And it's playing on every floor. And when you walk around, you're wearing a mask and you should be in all black. So everyone walking around, we're just shadows observing performances happening all around us. And Gaspar Noé's work, particularly in Climax, feels like you're in Sleep No More, because you are like the camera POV, kind of fly on the wall, moving from place to place and seeing spectacular events happen around you, but not necessarily in frame. So like whenever we follow Selva, we might follow her down the hallway, and then behind her, you'll just see somebody doing like grotesque popping and locking, dancing.
Yeah.
Or you'll see like the woman with her hair on fire, like scamper across the screen, but she's not the star of the scene. So I was just thinking about that, like how this feels like a cinematic version of Sleep No More.
Yeah, that actually makes sense a lot. And this also reminded me of another part in the movie that's in that same whole chaotic scene with the hair on fire and with Selva walking through, like kind of not knowing what's going on and trying to control everything.
Yeah.
Selva also walks into like a tapestry or something like that she gets wrapped up in and caught in, which makes also all the sense in the world with her trying to be the one that has control over the situation, where now she feels like wrapped up and constrained.
Yeah,
And
web.
yeah, and she's restrained now and she doesn't know what to do. So that kind of is her freak out. So when this thing wraps her up into like a little cocoon and she can't move, that's where she starts to lose it a little bit, because the control that she had over this group that she was kind of mentoring is now gone. Like, she doesn't know what to do. So once she breaks out of it, she's in a better place. But during that period, you could see the real fear in her face. Daddy and Riley, that's another interesting one, because Daddy is like, the big flamboyantly gay DJ.
Yep.
But he's kind of like, he's one of the ones that you aren't quite sure whether he's a femme or a dom. He's kind of a little bit of both, of like, a feminine and masculine personality trait. But then you have Riley, who's essentially a twink, like, for the most part. Like,
he's rich. He's a rich virgin.
Yeah, rich virgin. He's very tiny. He's very flamboyant. He's very wispy, like he's that kind of guy, and he's very attracted to Daddy throughout the entire trip, so to speak.
To go with my comic book references from earlier, the X-Men, if they were an Alpha Flight, it would be like Sasquatch and Puck.
I like that. Yeah, very, very true. That's a really good point, actually. So their situation, I feel like, is the least traumatic out of all of them, even though it's still
mentee.
Yeah, mentor mentee. I feel like there's a little bit of like a predatory advantage taking thing towards the end, but still very much in the grand scheme of things, theirs is almost like the happy ending, because they end up like spooned up together, like.
Yeah, so I would say what it seemed like is like Daddy didn't have a lot of emotional turbulence coming into this situation,
right?
And if anything, when people come to him freaking out, he just like pushes them away.
He's like kind of like, chill out.
Yeah, right. He's like, deal with your own shit. So like at the beginning, Selva, once they realize they're tripping, Selva comes up to him and he's at the DJ booth, and she's like, having a conniption, and he's like, right. Partying, relax. And then in the same way with David, he sees David in the hallway after David is rebuffed by the women, and he just tells David, leave the girls alone. And he is not an aggressive or malicious character within this context. He's kind of floating around, observing things. And my interpretation of his time with Riley is not so much even that they had sex. I didn't take that. I thought, I don't know. I read it as like he was just comforting him and getting him out of the way of the like psychedelic maelstrom that was happening.
I read it as protection. I read it as like when they woke up spooned up together, I read it more of as a like, I'm protecting this virgin, like, guy from this horror that's happening out there. Like, because when David tries to come into the room, he straight up slams the door in his face and is like, get the fuck out of here. And then he goes behind closed doors with Riley, and there's never any indication that they have sex. There really is not. It just, when they wake up spooning, it kind of very much has that like almost like fatherly protection bond, but then if you go back, one of the things that was kind of like also interesting throughout this whole thing is there's so much happening on screen for all these different characters and all these different people, that it's done very much in a way to keep you away from realizing that Psyche is the one that did it all, because you are purposefully steered away from her. So every time she shows up on screen, you're kind of like, oh yeah, there she is. But like, there's no focus to it. There's no, she's just there. Like, she very much is the observer, obviously, because she's the one that did it. But her presentation in the movie after she pees on the floor is very much just like, and now I see what my handiwork does,
Exactly. Well, she's also, because she's the one that's prepared for this, because she knows that the sangria spiked.
Yeah, so she's not losing her shit.
Yeah, she's just vibing, man. She's like, I'm on acid. This is what I wanted to do. I wanted to get everybody on acid. I don't
Yeah,
care about making friends. I didn't come here to make friends. I came here to dose everybody and dance by myself. And
they were
so,
literally all test subjects.
yeah,
They were guinea pigs.
and not everybody had a bad time. We saw all the people, a majority of them did, right? That's why it's a Gaspar Noe horror movie. But
Right.
when we look at the like Daddy and Riley, it worked out okay for them. Then there's like two or three other characters who are just dancing the whole time
Yeah, just chilling,
throughout this.
just doing their whole
So,
shit.
and like you could look at them negatively, but because they like didn't help anybody, but really that I think part of the message was like, this is your own trip. And the more you interact with other people, the more problems you're causing.
100%. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Now I want to get to one of the more fucked up nightmares before we
Yeah.
wrap up this whole journey,
Uh-huh.
and that's the ancestral nightmare.
Yeah, people hate it when brothers and sisters fuck unless you're watching Game of Thrones.
Right, and in Game of Thrones, you're like, you know what? I still think Jason Momoa is hot, even though he's a violent rapist. They're just like, you know what? I would still let him. Like,
Yeah.
that's a very different show.
And I was thinking about the Lannister kids, right? Jaime,
Right,
Cersei. Just people love them having sex.
they're totally down with it. Totally down with it in that sense. In this movie, man, the ancestral aspect of it was it was gross, but not even just in the ancestral gross way. It was in the predatory way. It was in the manipulation way. It was in the everything surrounding the actual act of the incest. So
Yeah.
everything else, all the emotional manipulation, all of the preying on his sister, like all of that was just like gross. You know what I mean? And then kind of like the whole like, okay, well they fucked. It was kind of like ew, but not like it was ew, but it was on the lower end of the ew scale, like compared to the rest of the stuff.
It is I like how you brought this up with like the hair being on fire as well, and this idea of like the the horrible thing that Gaspar Noe shows us, or that part in the story isn't necessarily the worst part of that dynamic.
Right.
It's the horror is, yes, like even with Tito, right? Tito's death is like, oh, that's horrific on paper, but it's like everything leading up to it is terrible, right? The
Right.
dynamic that this child is here in the first place is what's wrong.
Right.
And with the incest sleeping together, it's like, oh no, but from the very first interview that they had together, this relationship is toxic. This we're already seeing something that's awful, and it's just that the LSD heightened it or uncovered it, but it was always there, if that makes sense.
It totally makes sense. It totally makes sense. And also like, yeah, because like the controlling predatory manipulation is
Mm-hmm.
immediately apparent from from their first interview. So seeing that transition through the film and seeing that build through the film with their relationship
Mm-hmm.
makes it feel nastier and nastier, but not even from the incest aspect. Like that part of it is fucked up, but it's so fucked up to see the other stuff that you almost forget that it's an ancestral thing.
Yeah, I mean, it could
And then
have.
when it comes back around, you're like, oh, it was also that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, it was just like a bad boyfriend, bad girlfriend before, right? Like they looked like a bad boyfriend, bad girlfriend, bad couple, but then you're like, oh, they're related.
like,
Gross.
ew.
What's
And
the
also,
backstory?
and when they wake up, it goes right back to the controlling manipulation, right back to it because they wake up. She knows that something has happened. Like she can feel it, like, physically that something has happened. And the first thing he does is, don't worry, nothing happened. Don't tell dad. Like it just is like immediately, like just
Yeah.
right back into the control, right back into the manipulation, which again almost makes you swerve away from the fact that they're brother and sister,
And
because it's like, yes, that part of it is bad, but the underlying part of it is almost worse.
Yeah.
that he's controlling his sister's life like that.
Our man Noe, he loves the taboo. The incest taboo is also big in Enter the Void. And
It really is, yeah.
but within that context of Enter the Void, it felt like there was this backstory where they had bonded through the trauma of seeing their parents die at a young age. And he just has this really good way of, I think, when he wants to, showing people's psychology and the decisions they make based on past traumas. So like that relationship in Enter the Void almost feels like they were frozen in maturity and acting as each other's mother and father because they'd lost their parents.
Yeah.
So kind of like gave if not a justifying their weird incest vibes, it rationalized them so that you as the audience member could be like, okay, I see what's happening here. And it's like twisted, but
sure,
but it's understandable.
it puts it in perspective.
Yeah, in this one, there's no sense of that. There's no backstory to like cling to. There's just, oh man, these are like Tyler is terrible, and also I wouldn't want to be in a dance troupe with either of them.
No, keep me away in every way possible.
Yeah, I don't want to hang out with like a weird incesty brother and sister, adult brother and sister, just at the party.
Right. So to take this from the beginning to the end, Lou is there in the beginning of the movie, crawling through the snow with a trail of blood behind her. And you weren't sure where that was coming from. And as it goes through the movie, you find out that it's because she's essentially had a forced miscarriage and then starts to stab herself and then starts to project at other people because of them essentially ganging up on her and sending her into a complete mental spiral. And then she feels like she has to escape. So she goes out into the blizzard where Omar was.
And becomes a bloody snow angel.
She does indeed become a bloody snow angel in a very artistic shot, by the way. Like it's actually it's beautiful in how terrifying and bad it is, but it's very beautiful. But when the police show up and the paramedics show up, the thing that he did with the camera, turning it upside down and making the perspective be inverted and upside down like that, I thought was a brilliant camera choice because it's immediately disorienting and it's after you've gone through a film that has a shitload of other disorienting stuff, but this is a very simple disorientation that legitimately fucks with you. Like as you're watching it, you're like, you're turning your own head because you're like, I've seen all this happening so far. What are you doing? And like, it's almost an assault to your senses after we're getting ready for a catharsis where it's just like, and nope, fuck you. We're going upside down. Like,
oh my God. The last thing I would want after watching this movie, like the harsh daylight, I wanted to stay night forever.
Right.
Because I was like, dude, the dawn is going to be terrible.
For
everyone in this.
Yeah. And when they all wake up, that was the other thing. Most of the people came out of it just fine. Like, when I say just fine, I mean, like, they didn't die. Like, the body count was actually relatively low. If
there's one barbecued child.
Yeah. Well, it's an impactful body count on that one.
That's right. One Omar is definitely frozen.
For sure.
Lou might survive.
Yeah, we're not 100% sure if she survives, but her baby's definitely dead. So we have a fetus, and then we have a stage, I don't know, we'll call it 5 or 6 fetus that gets barbecued. And then we have Omar, who is a Muslim sickle. Like that's yeah. So you've got 3 considerably traumatic deaths. Yeah. Because even the chick that had her hair caught on fire, Gazelle or whatever her name is, she survives. I mean, she's barbecued, but she survives. She didn't die.
Terrible. Her career's over.
Career's definitely over. David didn't die. I expected him to get stomped to death. He didn't die.
Yeah.
And also, like, when everybody starts to hit the orgy part of the experience,
Yeah.
that's when either Bats or Cyborg, I can't remember who it is, but he's the one that's having the most traditional sex, where it just is straight up on the floor, missionary, going to Pound Town. Everybody else is having weird alcohol sex. Like, you know what I mean? Like his arc was the same the whole time. Get laid, get laid, get laid, get laid. Even if he's drunk, get laid, get laid, get laid. And so that's what he did. So he was the one that came out of it probably the best at the end. He was just like, nope, had a nut and I'm done. Like, it was just,
yeah. I wonder if any of the other dancers had like a heart attack or something. But it seems like most of them could get out of this experience pretty unscathed with some Gatorade.
Sure. Yeah.
And like a nice fruit salad.
Hit some Pedialyte, maybe.
Yeah.
Which can we say this now? Pedialyte has completely given up on the branding of it being for infants now. They just totally target it to alcoholics now. That's how alcoholic our society is, that Pedialyte completely changed branding and completely changed their target demographic from infants, from pediatric patients, to being like, fuck it, it's for drunks.
Are you a baby with diarrhea, or are you a grown man with a bad headache? Pedialyte.
Are you 5 with diarrhea, or are you 25 with diarrhea? Pedialyte. It just is, that's where it's at. So with this movie, there's no I don't want to say there's no payoff, because there is a payoff. But the interesting part of it is that if this movie is about alcoholism, and it is about addiction, and it is about those things, at the end of the movie, most of the people are okay. But I think, to me, even though most of the people are okay, the ones, quote unquote, okay, I mean, they just went through a fucking complete nightmare, but the ones that are not okay are the most impactful. Like, they're the most traumatic, And I think that speaks to alcoholism, because if you get blackout drunk, one of two things happen. You either wake up a little worse for wear with a headache and some shits, or you've done the worst thing you could do.
Yeah, you've hurt yourself or you've hurt somebody.
Somebody that you love, chances are. Chances are somebody that you care for, you've either hurt yourself or them, or God forbid, you've gotten behind the wheel of a car and you've killed somebody, Like, so it's the two extremes. Like, you're flipping the coin. Every time you do that, every time you go out and you get that fucked up, you're flipping the coin. Am I going to wake up and just need some Advil and water? Or am I going to wake up to a text that says, oh, you killed Jerry last night? It's just one of there's almost never a gray area of where it's like, you don't get a text that was like, dude, you blacked out and like upper deckered my house. Like, that's not a blackout thing. That's of like, I drank just enough to shit in the tank of your toilet just to be an asshole. Like, just, that's like frat boy shit. It's always something really bad, or I'm still safe. And I think that's kind of what happened with this movie.
Yeah.
It's very based in realism.
It's well, I want to say the reason to watch it is not so much for a moral. It is to be transported into a film with exactly what you said, this realism of I always think of Gaspar Noe as Nightcrawler from X-Men. He will grab you, and in a cloud of brimstone, you will be teleported into a completely different realm for the time that you're with him.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. And I think that's a great way of putting it.
And this was teleporting us into like Dante's Inferno and getting to see the psyche of all kind of like our universal, all of these different manifestations of our inner turbulence that we suppress.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And like we talked about before, the end of the movie comes along and the person that was responsible for all of it was Psyche.
Yeah.
Which makes perfect sense, that the assault on everybody's psyche was the fault of Psyche, and she's the
Yeah.
one that did it. And she did it as an experiment, is basically what she says, because she's studying LSD's effect on the human brain. And then she drops a couple of more drops of LSD in her fucking eyeballs, and then you're just like, have you not had enough? Like,
Yeah.
what's going on?
Well, it's a new day, and you gotta
I'm
keep
gonna go ahead and
party going.
drop some more acid in my eyeballs. And then it hits a very awesome credit sequence, which Gaspar Noe is kind of known for. His credits are dope. And this is no different. He also did it in the middle of the movie. He had one of those weird credit sequences that was just right in the middle of the movie, and it was like, what the fuck are you doing, Gaspar? Um, but it was, at the end of the day, it was a good movie. Like, it was a brilliant movie. It was borderline a masterpiece.
I give it 5 tabs with star stamps on them.
Beautiful. I give it 5 drops on a sugar cube for sure.
Yeah. So this is it's I don't know. I mean, it's not for everybody. Like, if you don't want to have a child being electrocuted in your movie, maybe this isn't for you. But I never saw there's the Macaulay Culkin movie where like he gets stung by a bee and dies from anaphylactic shock.
My girl, he can't see, he can't see without his glasses.
Those are equally traumatic films for me. I'm never
Sure.
gonna watch My Girl, but a lot of you think that's like a G-rated, like let's eat ice cream and watch this sad movie, and that's okay. Film.
Okay, listen, that was a
So-
open casket child death, and this was a closed electrical closet child death. So I feel like between the two,
Yeah,
Macaulay Culkin's more traumatic here.
exactly, and it got and that scene is like family fare.
Right.
So
I would say that I would recommend this movie for sure. I would recommend it to people, especially if you really want to jump into a truly psychological horror film, which is what this is. This to me is the epitome of a psychological horror film, so I will definitely say that I recommend it.
Yeah.
You've heard what we talked about here today, so trigger warnings abound. If there's any of these things that fuck with you, be very aware that they will fuck with you in this movie.
There's no jump scares in this movie. All of the horrifying things that you see are, I don't even know, man. I just feel like they're art and they last. And a testament for me with good art is something that I think about hours after I've seen it or days after I've seen it, and I think about this movie a lot.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. So we're gonna wrap this up real quick with a thing that we do here on it. Usually over on AGHP, we just do recommendations. So we're gonna do a recommendation and a de-recommendation on this one. So what we're telling you is something we recommend to you and something we recommend that you stay the fuck away from. That can be music, movies, that could be anything. It could be food, it could be whatever you want. I will start that, and I will say that I recommend the movie Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. That's the new A24 movie, and it's awesome. And I de-recommend another movie that just came out. And the only reason I'm de-recommending this one is because it had a lot of potential, and they cut corners every possible way they could, and that's the movie called The Invitation.
Ooh.
And they gave away literally everything in the trailer. It is probably one of the worst horror movie trailers for that reason, because it's like kind of a cool trailer, but then when you watch the movie, you're like, you literally told me the whole fucking story. Like, you actually showed me both the beginning and the end of this movie in the trailer. Like, that to me is inexcusable. If you're going to do that in a trailer, you have no faith in your movie surprising anybody or doing anything worth note. This is a vampire movie that is a PG-13 vampire movie, and you can tell where they cut all the corners, and it really sucks. The first 25 minutes of the movie are actually really good, and then it jumps straight off of a cliff. Like, it goes real bad from there. So if you want to watch that movie, just wait for streaming. It's not worth seeing in a theater, but Bodies, Bodies, Bodies is very worth seeing in a theater. So I would definitely go for those. Gabe, what do you got on those?
Okay, well, we're going to start with my recommends because that's much easier for me right now. The recommends that I have are I recently, for the first time, saw 2009's The Orphan.
Oh, yeah.
And then I watched Orphan First Kill immediately afterwards.
Yes.
I've never seen this movie before, and I really loved not only The Orphan, but the sequel made the first film even better.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where, and the sequel inverted a lot of the themes of the first one. So it was like a perfect sequel, not in because it didn't just heighten like most sequels do, but it actually twisted your perception.
Right.
And I love that. And using the same actress in both roles, one when she's a real child, and then to do a sequel like more than 10 years later and have her de-aged to look right.
Right.
Like a pretty astonishing feat of not only CGI, but like all the other camera tricks that you might want to use and act.
Here's the thing.
Yeah.
They didn't de-age her with CGI at all. That was actually
exactly. It's like makeup, right?
That was all makeup, and it was camera tricks.
Yeah, so cool. So I'm a big fan of The Orphan and The Orphan First Kill. And in fact, like the only track, so I recommend everybody see both of them back to back. It's almost like watching Creep 1 and Creep 2.
Yeah.
Which are like another perfect pair of like, first film and sequel.
Real quick on that, I will tell people, at least this is my opinion on it, for Orphan First Kill, the first 20 minutes make it seem like it's going to be a bad movie. And I only say that in the sense that like the color grading is a little weird. It's got a little bit of like that overdone splatteriness to it in the beginning. And it feels like it's just going to be one of those things that kind of hits it on the head. And it does it very much on purpose, because after that 20-minute mark, shit turns on, and it does it in a very brilliant way. And it feels like a little bit of a bait and switch, just because the tonal difference between the first one and the second one in that first 20 minutes is drastic. Like
Absolutely.
It almost goes like 80s cheese in the first 20 minutes.
Yeah. So, but stick with it because it just keeps getting better and better. And when I tell you to stick with it, it's not like I'm telling you to watch like 3 episodes of a series or like you got to watch season 1 and 2 and then it gets really good in season 3. But if you devote 48 hours of your life,
right. No, it's just that, like I said, it's very much done on purpose. Like, and at first when I was watching it, I was kind of like, oh, if this is going to be the tone of the whole fucking movie, I'm not going to like it, because I love the first one. But then again, that first 20 minutes is very much done by design. So yeah, the second one, Orphan First Kill, is very, very good. Solid recommendations on that.
And for something that I didn't like, or that annoys me, let's just go with that, is I've been rewatching like Romero stuff, and I love everything up through Land of the Dead, and then wish that he had just stopped making zombie movies after that. So if you're a Romero fan, just stop after Land of the Dead.
That's fair. I feel like that's fair, because you got like Diary of the Dead, which is kind of like
And then there's one where they're on an island, and it's like it's a terrible.
It's a bad one.
Yes.
Yeah, you're right. The later Romero movies after Land of the Dead, and arguably a lot of people think that Land of the Dead sucked. I thought it was good. But after Land of the Dead, yeah, it unfortunately does. It does just dive right off of the bridge. Like, it just is not good after that.
So, I don't think I'm saying anything that is like brave when I say these things, but it's almost like keep the man's legacy alive in your mind, and by ignoring all of his later work.
If you want to see a different side of Romero, go on to Shudder and watch The Amusement Park, because it was his lost movie that never got released. And it's not a zombie movie at all. It's actually a movie about elder abuse, and it's brilliant.
Hilarious.
Black and white. It's creepy. It's not like it's a horror film psychologically, but if nobody told you it was directed by Romero, you'd have no fucking idea. It would not make sense. So real quick before we get you out of here, Gabe, I'm going to throw some questions at you. We do the Sinister Six over at AGHP, so I'm going to throw some alternate versions of the Sinister Six here for you, and get your opinions on them. First one, Michael Myers or Leatherface?
Leatherface all day, because Leatherface is trying to all he wants to do is feed his family, at least in the first film. He's a homemaker, and he is great. He's just I like masks that you make yourself, instead of
Beautiful.
going to the store and stealing a mask. Michael Myers.
I love that. All right. Overrated and underrated franchise.
Overrated franchise and underrated franchise. Well, the no one talks about Creep enough, and I've already brought it up, and I can't wait for them to make a part 3.
Awesome.
Overrated franchise is the Unbreakable ones. The first one was great. The second one was cool as a standalone, and the third one was trash.
All right. I like those.
All you need to do is watch the first one.
Yeah, that's actually very, very accurate. So over on AGHP, we say what horror movie influenced your tastes the most. And what I want to know is what is the most recent horror movie that has influenced your tastes?
Oh man, most recent horror movie to influence my tastes. God, the last what have I seen recently? Oh,
Like what's the most recent movie that has shifted your taste in horror, has made you start going like, I want to go start watching this direction in horror?
Oh, this one.
You think? Yeah.
Yeah. Because I'd never watched any other Gaspar Noe until except for Climax, and then you had me watch and then
Enter the
because
Void.
of this, I watched Enter the Void, and now I want to go and look at more French extremity.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't really like vibing with that. I'd seen High Tension back in the day, but I've never seen Martyrs. I don't know if that's part of it, but it keeps getting brought up.
Martyrs is one of the French extremity films.
Yeah, so A, I've never seen that, and then B, I've never seen Possession, which other podcasts have talked about.
Yep.
In relation to this.
High Tension.
High Tension, I've seen.
Okay.
But Suspiria is another one that I haven't seen in relation to this movie.
Okay.
So I've got a rabbit hole to go down with Martyrs, Possession, and Suspiria.
Beautiful. Okay, next one is going to be which horror movie do you think deserves a sequel?
Oh my God, which horror movie deserves a sequel?
That hasn't got one.
Well, man, I love Eli Roth, and I'd love to see a sequel to Green Inferno.
Ooh, okay. I like that.
More Inferno.
I actually do like that. I think that actually could be great. I think that also has room for follow-up.
Yeah.
I absolutely think it has room for follow-up. Yeah, that's a really interesting take on it. I like that. Okay. Next one is we're hitting you with a franchise. Tell me your favorite entry and your least favorite entry. Halloween.
I liked Rob Zombie's the first half of Rob Zombie's remake.
Okay.
Because I enjoyed the origin story of Michael. I also like that Rob Zombie feels like the Quentin Tarantino of B horror. Like you can tell he loves horror movies, and the fact that he casts like old actors in his films, and that they talk about pop culture in that. I loved that first half, and I know that's a controversial take because people didn't like Rob Zombie's Halloweens.
Yeah, it's whatever.
That's my favorite, and then my least favorite Halloween is probably part 4.
Okay, so we're looking at the that one is the
or H2O. H2O is the one I hated. I didn't like H2O.
H2, yeah, H2O is hard. You can't be scared in a Halloween movie when they're doing all the things that they're doing in that movie. Also, whenever Josh Hartnett's hair shows up in a movie, that's the scariest part of the movie.
It was like a well-lit Noxzema commercial, and it was like nostalgia, and like I didn't need any of it.
Right. All right, I'm gonna throw this last one at you here. If you could pick one director to make a horror film, who would it be?
Oh wow. I mean, I'm gonna go with I'm actually gonna go with Tarantino.
You want to see a Tarantino horror?
Yeah, because he gets so close to it with his I'd say like in Hateful Eight, the ability to like bring all this paranoia in. And I think there's like a close connection between horror and comedy where you're trying to elicit surprise, but
Sure.
in a way where it leads more to terror than it does to a laugh. And that he already has such a well of knowledge when it comes to like 70s auteurs.
Sure.
And most of those dudes made their bones with at least one horror movie to get them started off. So
yeah, that makes sense.
I feel like he could fit into that.
I will say this. I hated The Hateful Eight, but I will say one thing that was impressive about it to me. He managed to make a movie that was like 5 hours long or something like that.
Yeah.
Like it was so long, but he managed to make a movie that long be filled with tension.
That's what I'm saying. He also did that with Inglourious Bastards. And it's not that The Hateful Eight is great at all, but what it is it reminded me of John Carpenter's The Thing. And because you don't know who the bad guy is, right? And they're all trapped and isolated in this one space. When you brought up Inglourious Bastards, you know, the Jewish family hiding under the floorboards at the beginning, or all of the scenes with like sort of the screws being tightened every time that people are being interrogated by Hans Landa.
Yeah.
That Inquisitor character, I could see what if there was like a Freddy type, supernatural character that was more like a Hans Landa.
Sure.
As a possibility for one way to go with this, or just the terror of having to hide in small confined spaces where hoping that you're not, hunted down and killed.
100%.
There's a lot of horror that he could really tap into.
Yeah, and he came close with Grindhouse. Grindhouse was kind of like his little dipping his toes in there.
I get, you're absolutely right. I forgot about that because it was so, I liked it, but it was so indulgent and bad.
Right. It was that was not a true Quentin Tarantino horror film. That's not what that was. That was just kind of him, like that was him and Robert Rodriguez just having a bros night out to make a horror film. Like it was just like, and it wasn't great. It was not.
I want him to try like elevate, like I hate the word elevated, but I'd like to see him try to do it and divorce humor from it.
You could have literally just said, try to make a horror movie, because that's not what he did with Grindhouse. That was him just liking the smell of his own farts. That's all that was.
And Dusk Till Dawn is not a horror movie to me. It just has vampires in it. It's an action movie with vampires.
Agree with you. Yeah, I agree with you 100%.
It's fantasy at that
1,000%. Yeah, absolutely. All right, man. Well, this has been super fun. Gabe, where can people find you?
All right. Well, you've heard the beginning of the podcast, but again, you can come and check me out at Halal Cartels. That's the podcast that I host with Samir Nassim. And we also host a live comedy show every Wednesday at Pete's Candy Store in Williamsburg, Brooklyn at 10 p.m. Funhouse Comedy or Halal Cartels. And my Instagram is Gabe Pac 1, GABEPAC, and the number 1.
Fuck yeah. So everybody check out what Gabe does. Check out his live show. Check out Halal Cartels. This has been the Grindhouse. You guys have been awesome. Check us out over on Patreon. That's AGH. It's patreon.com/AGHP666. Go ahead and sign up to be a member of the Army of the Goddamned, which is where you're going to hear these episodes. And then after you hear one of these episodes, you know what? I might want to throw these guys some scratch so they can do some cooler shit. So that's what you do. And aside from that, you guys enjoy yourselves, enjoy horror, celebrate horror, start some fires, break some glass. Have a wonderful night. Thank you guys so much.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Oh, Jonas, that was a treat.